Hey boys and girls, so we are on POW week 4. Arcade games is our theme. Let's look at Thursday. David, Jenny, and Dan went to the arcade on Wednesday. David spent $3.25. Jenny spent $2.25 more than Dan, who spent $1.75 less than David. How much did they spend in all? Okay, so I got a lot of names here and a lot of different amounts and math to do with those amounts. So I've mentioned this before. Anytime I have a lot of names, I always like to kind of make a list of that information and work from there. Now, another thing that I tend to want to do is to start with my sure thing number. So in these types of problems, usually they give you kind of a starting point or a sure thing. So when I go through and I reread, I see that David spent $3.25. So I'm going to start with David because he's my sure thing. He is the absolute amount that I already know. All right. So now let's go through and let's look for the other information. It says Jenny spent $2.25 more than Dan, so there's another name, who spent $1.75 less than David. So I've got Jenny and I've got Dan that I need to add here. And I've got Dan. Dan the man. Okay, here we go. So when I look at this problem in order, I know that David spent that much, but it says Jenny spent $2.25 more than Dan. Well, take a look. Do I know how much Dan spent yet? No. So I should probably do that first. Now, when I read on, it says that Dan spent $1.75 less than David. Do I know how much David spent? Yeah, David spent $3.25. So Dan's amount is $3.25. Let me go back a minute. Okay. Dan is $3.25. And it says he spent $1.75 less than David. So would I add or subtract the $1.75? I hope you said subtract, because that would be correct. Less means subtract. So go ahead, take a minute. You can even write it over to the side to calculate how much Dan spent. Okay? All right. So now that I have Dan's amount, let's go back to my problem. Jenny spent $2.25 more than Dan. Okay, well, more means that Jenny spent $2.25 more than whatever Dan's amount was. All right? So I'm going to have to do some math and plug Dan's number into Jenny's number. All right, so once we have that, the last part tells me how much did they spend in all. In all means I want to find a grand total. Okay? So that means I'm going to take how much David spent, however much Jenny spent, which we still have to calculate, and however much Dan spent, and we're going to add that up, find that total. And that should give you your answer. Good luck, guys. All right, guys, we are on Friday's POW week 4, and I don't have the whole page displayed. I only have the map and the directions. So the questions are underneath that, obviously, and I'll read the statement at the top. It says, the following map, the gray box shows the location of the arcade. Each letter represents a different student's house. So then it lists Nikki's following directions, and then the questions we're looking to answer today are what letter house did she start from, so where's her starting point, and what letter was her friend's house. Okay, so let's go back here. This gray box here, which I'm now shading red, that's the arcade, okay? So that's her ending point. So when we look at this gray box of directions, Nikki followed the directions below and ended up at the arcade. Go 5 blocks north, go 3 blocks west, go 4 blocks south to your friend's house, go 6 blocks east, go 2 blocks north to the arcade. So when we think of this, here's her starting point, here's her ending point at the arcade. Well, guys, when we don't know where she started, but we know where she ended up. She ended up here at the arcade. So a strategy, a problem-solving strategy I could use to solve this problem is let's work backwards. Since we don't know where we started, but we know where we ended up, working backwards is going to help us figure out where that starting point was. So watch what I'm going to do here. We're going to actually go backwards from the arcade to this stop, then go back to that stop, then go back, go back, go back, and that should lead us to our starting point. But here's the key, guys. When you go backwards, what happens to the directions that we're going in? They go backwards as well. So, for example, it says, if we're at the arcade and it says go 2 blocks north to the arcade, we're not going north if we're going backwards. We want to make sure that we go the opposite of this since we're working backwards. So instead of going 2 blocks north to the arcade, the opposite of that would be what? What is the opposite of north? If you said south, you are correct. I'm going to go ahead and draw a little compass rose here for my directionally challenged friends here. So if it says go 2 blocks north, I'm really going to go 2 blocks south. So 1, 2. All right, I'm done with that clue. I'm going to cross it off. Now let's read our next clue. Go 6 blocks east. East. Well, what's the opposite of east? If you said west, you're correct. So I'm going to count over 6 blocks to the west. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now go 4 blocks south to your friend's house. So instead of south, we're going to want to go, we're going to want to continue, instead of south, to go north. So it said to go 4 blocks south, we're going to do the opposite of that and go 4 blocks north. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, let's keep moving. Go 3 blocks west. The opposite of west would be east. 1, 2, 3. And now let's go 5 blocks north. But we want to do the opposite. Remember, we're working backwards. So the opposite of north, we're going to head south. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so what I'll have you do now that we've mapped out our working backwards strategy is take a look at those two questions at the bottom regarding the letters. So which letter did she start from, and which letter was her friend's house? Good luck, guys.